Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Own Your Essence podcast, where we get to have deep transformational conversations with some of our favorite people. We are your host,
Zach.
and April DeMille. And Lee, take it away.
So today I'm super excited. I think we're both super excited to talk to a woman who, well, you know what? I'll just read her bio and then we can introduce her.
Fair
So
enough.
her name is Dr. Katherine Kelly, and Dr. Katherine Kelly, uh, named the pioneer of soul health after the publication of her first best-selling book, Soul Health, Aligning with Spirit for Radiant Living. So we're excited to have her on.
Ooh, I can't wait to hear about her modalities. Hey,
Ah,
lady. So, Lee just read your introduction, and thank you for being patient with us today. Our
sure.
process has been a little choppy getting off, but here we are.
It's all good.
Yeah, yeah. So, do you prefer to go by Catherine, Dr. Kelly? Like, what's your,
It's really what you feel is most appropriate for your audience.
I mean, you worked hard for the doctor title, so
Well, a lot of times what people do is they introduce me as that and then start calling me Catherine. That is fine with me. So
okay.
it just depends. I know everybody's a little different with how they like to do things.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about how you got your doctor title? Maybe we'll start with that. And
You mean during the podcast?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
let's start there and then
happy
maybe
to
we
do that.
can move into more about your background and what brought you here.
Happy to do that.
Yeah, okay.
And would you like me to start now? I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was
Yeah, yes. No, go. We're
I
all
was
ears
waiting
on
for
you.
I was waiting for a cue. I'm used to people asking me questions right away. So I'm a holistic health psychologist, and I was trained traditionally for counseling psychology.
Okay.
And so I went through a PhD program. In fact, I have way too much education for my own good because I have two master's degree and a doctoral degree, and I did a postdoc in family medicine.
Oh,
But
wow.
yeah, it's a lot. But really, what ended up happening is throughout my own evolution, I also started very much integrating spirituality, the soul. Kind of, again, you use the word essence too, but I use the word essence to explain what the soul really is. And so that's where the doctorate came from. And, I kind of laughed because I've actually been called Dr. Soul, the soul doctor, all kinds of different things as a result of the work I do, but really the formal education came from the counseling psychology degree.
Okay.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you've actually had, I believe I read 37 years of work in the mental health realm, correct? And then,
I
and
have.
then- which is amazing, by the way. And then I think it was 20 plus years doing intuitive soul work. Am I getting that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I started working in different mental health units actually when I was 18 years old, and then got my doctorate. I went to get my bachelor's degree, got that done when I was 22, went right into doing my master's and my doctorate. So, yeah, I have a long history, a
Yeah.
long history.
I would be curious too if there was any sort of transitional moment that you can recall, like, starting in the mental health realm of things and then deciding, like, I think I'm going to go into, intuitive kind of work and soul work and all of that. Like, was there any sort of moment for you that kind of catalyzed that?
Well, I've had spiritual experiences ever since middle school.
Mm.
And it really was when my father passed away when I was 21 that I really started having these intuitive hits. Frankly, I didn't know what they were. I just kind of lived with them, went with them, didn't realize that other people didn't have this kind of stuff happening. And so when I went through my doctoral training, I was doing traditional doctoral training, and yet all the while I'm like reading about different spiritual kinds of aspects. And when I went into, I mean, it was interesting how this all. I personally believe that your path is created for you. It's not that you create your own path. And so, interestingly, throughout well, actually, my master's and my doctoral training, I was having these spiritual experiences, but also exposed to things like Reiki and energy healing and sound healing and, all these different kinds of spiritual modalities. And I think my own first intuitive reading was happened when I was 27. And what's fascinating about that is, as she's doing this work, I'm realizing, okay, well, gosh, I've been doing this stuff for a while. And, you know, I think it was a natural transition, honestly, when years ago, I just, in the middle of therapy sessions, things were happening. And, I remember one particular time where I was doing this visualization with a client and kind of walking her through this very deep visualization, and she starts having these past life experiences that she didn't realize were past life experiences, but I knew what was happening. So I was doing past life regression before I was ever formally trained to do it. And so then went on to get trained by Brian Weiss, and all these wonderful situations happened. So I think really there were many points along the way that just pointed to integrating the holistic work and the spiritual work along with the psychological work. And honestly, it goes hand in hand. I don't think you can really do a good job of doing whole person health if you're not integrating the soul in what you do.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's so interesting, and I love what you just said that it goes hand in hand because I do believe too that they are so interconnected. But I have also found, and again, everyone's on their own journey and their own path, and it's okay. But a lot of or some of the people that I encounter who are in like maybe mental health work or in the more kind of I call it the analytical realms of things, where it takes a bit more of, the pragmatism and all that, have very much one foot in that world. And then, there's the holistic practitioners that maybe tend to have a bit more of a foot in that world. And it seems to be changing with the landscape now, but that sometimes it's just like, they're very much over here or over here. And so I'm fascinated and intrigued always by anyone who kind of is a middle point for those things. And I would love to hear actually more about that, about how you find that they interconnect.
Well, I think from a mental health perspective, I've got a book series called the Soul of Psychology series, and I've got the first two books done on that, anxiety and depression, and the next one will be trauma, the following one will be grief, many others after that. But it's that whole idea of a lot of our wounds. There are a lot of we see them as psychological wounds, but a lot of them are very soul based. You can't have trauma and not have it affect the soul. A lot of times anxiety is what I call an energetic misfiring of our soul, according to some of the experiences we've had in the past. Depression, probably, I say like 90% of depression is what I call suppression of the soul. It's not a clinical depression where, if you're living your best life, you're not feeling depressed. But if something is what I call suppressing you and holding you back from being in that best life perspective, you never feel good. And so, I think most mental health concerns have a very strong soul basis in them, but I have not yet found another practitioner who really puts it together in a practical way to help people understand how this all goes together, because pretty much everything we do is an expression of our soul in one way or another. Anyway, we just, most people don't know that. And so for me, it's a no-brainer, but one of the things I'm doing is teaching. I've got a certification course to teach practitioners and coaches how to do this and how to understand the soul, because again, you're not finding this anywhere in traditional training.
Yeah, amazing.
I have a quick question, if you don't mind. One of the things that you just said kind of came up for me was, and I believe you. I believe 100% that what you're speaking is right when you're talking about, depression and mental illness and how it really shows up because we're not living our best selves. But I've even had a client that asked me once, well, does that mean if I'm grieving and I'm heartbroken over a certain situation that I'm not living my best self? And if you have some insight on people that ask those questions, could you offer your thoughts on that? Because I had thoughts on that.
Yeah, so for that particular question, grief is a part of human life. We're not going to
Right,
escape
right.
that. So does it mean we're not living our best life? No, but what it means is there are lessons and experiences in every single aspect of the human condition that can season us and help us grow and evolve.
Right.
And so depending on the circumstances of the grief, it could be a catalyst for growth in a whole different way
Yeah.
that person never expected. So, it's all very individual. And I talk about the soul path, and, everybody's experience of mental health concerns is different because of how their soul is reflected in whatever they're experiencing.
Yeah.
So
And
it's,
I think the way I had explained it was it's the difference of, for me, it was the difference of, are you sitting in it or are you processing? Because I feel like there's different things, right? Like where we
absolutely.
can just kind of sit there and stagnate, or
Mhm,
are we like moving through this, processing, allowing,
mhm.
and things like that. And that's kind of how I put it.
Well, and another aspect of grief, which is something I'm really going to flesh out in this book, is the whole idea of there's a human grief and then there's a karmic grief. And the human grief part of that is, we miss that person, or they affected us in either a positive or a negative way, and we have to process through that. So that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But the karmic grief part of that is sometimes when a person dies, it also marks the end of that karmic relationship. And so, energetically speaking, those karmic ties start pulling out, and it's like viscerally painful. That can be the same in a marriage that's, dissolving. And, I have a client, I had a client, I don't work with her anymore, but, about 4 months after she left a marriage that she was really excited to get out of, she came into my office and she said, I don't understand why I'm hurting so bad because I was looking forward to being away from him. I don't miss him. I don't want to live in the situation with him anymore. And I had to explain to her that the karmic contract that she had with that person was pulling out because she was done. They
Yeah.
had done what they were supposed to do, but that I have to do this visually, but that experience of having those karmic strands disentangle and release
Yeah.
is like a visceral pain.
It is, and I'll say from my standpoint, I happen to know that this is my last human experience here, and I experienced some of that you're talking about because I know this is my last life, and I'm removing myself from this 3D reality, and so even I have moments of that pain because I know I'm releasing on a bigger scale.
Yeah. And this is actually, I wasn't supposed to come back, but they kind of strong armed me to come back. But
Yeah,
it's
I think they
basically,
strong-armed a few of us.
yeah. And it's here to teach a lot of what we're here to teach. So, everything I'm doing right now, is about that. And, it's really interesting because I'm teaching this course and I'm helping people realize that you know, to me, there are two things that we have to accomplish on this Earth school plane before we can graduate or leave. And one of them is learning enough self love, enough of the understanding of self love that we honor ourselves. And then the second part is that we're living in our soul's purpose enough so that basically we can move on to the next dimension. And so it's one of those things where I love talking to people who understand these different levels because I know that they're in their soul's purpose as well. So it's just very fun to have these conversations.
Yeah, and then Lee, do you have other questions? Because if not, I have something I would like to add right here.
You can go for it. Yeah.
Okay. You had mentioned something about you feel like everything is predetermined before we get here.
Yeah, not necessarily predetermined. I didn't use that word.
Okay, right.
um,
So can
things
you
are laid
correct me then, like on
Yeah,
how?
things are laid out. The Akashic records are basically the etheric records of everything past, present, future, with the caveat that we have free will.
Right.
And so when it comes to predetermined, we have lots of options, and it's a matter of whether or not we as humans have advanced enough to make a discerning decision for where we go, in the future. And so there are
Mhm.
lots of different options and different paths. And honestly, that's where we hiccup or get detoured is that if we don't take the path that really is aligned with our true self, or our higher self, well, then we are going to either come back to do it all over again, or we're going to have to find a way to get back on that path. So it's a really interesting thing because, free will is a thing. It's a reality. But that's the biggest part of that is free will is all about learning how to align ourselves for, again, I use the word alignment a lot because it helps people go, oh, yeah, that's really aligned with me, or wow, I'm really misaligned from whatever it might be.
Right.
And it just helps them realize, oh, if I keep making the choices that are going to be aligned with me, well, then I don't have to worry about anything because I'm getting where I'm supposed to be.
Right. Because then we
That
don't
helps.
have these tower moments that are redirecting us all the time.
Right.
Yeah, no, totally. Absolutely.
Right.
That interestingly kind of leads me into the next question. You kind of answered it, but there was something I think on your Instagram that said it usually takes discomfort to initiate your soul searching journey, right?
Yes.
I think I'm getting that correct. Um, and my curiosity, reading that was, well, is there a way we can get there without, taking April's words, the tower moments? I feel like you kind of just answered that being in alignment, right?
Well, and also, one of the things I say often, and I believe that about myself just as much as anybody else, is that we generally don't change unless we're tired enough of ourselves or our situations. And so sometimes we have to be uncomfortable enough or shaken awake to go, oh, wow, yeah, I'm really not doing, myself any justice with where things are at. So I do think that human discomfort plays an amazing role in our evolution, but a lot of times people become very victimized by discomfort. Oh my God, this is happening to me. No, it's actually happening for you. Your soul and the universe and source are working together to try to shake things up and get you kind of back on track. But it's the typical human way, unfortunately, to again kind of fall victim to that and not realize that we have a lot of agency over where we go. But and I can open up a whole other conversation by talking about soul age and how important that is in how we decide where we go, because a lot of times younger souls just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, and it's the older souls that are like, no, let me get this done because I don't want to come back. So there's lots of different levels to this.
I feel like I have mixed feelings on this because, like, for me, I think that discomfort, unfortunately, we are creatures of habit, right? So sometimes it takes the discomfort to make us move our asses. But on the other hand, I know that we also have a lot of potential to create our realities
Mhm.
in that free will. And I don't like to affirm that every evolution I make in my process has to be uncomfortable. So I'm trying to find the balance, if that makes sense.
So our soul's most natural state is joy and contentment. And
Right.
so really I look at discomfort as just like a little radar detector of, oh, something's misaligned. So it's not that we have to we certainly should not be getting mired in our discomfort. It's really a cue that, oh, wait, hey, there's something trying to get my attention that I need to realign. So it's not that no pain, no gain at all. That is not where I come from. It's just that it's very human to have discomfort.
Yeah.
And if we weren't having discomfort, we probably wouldn't be human, but
Well,
it's that.
that's true because it is part of the human. I mean, we have all the polarities in the human experience, and we are here to, you know, have a little taste of all of that.
And as we create our reality, if we can understand that our true north is that joy and contentment, well, then, yeah, we can choose how quickly we get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And then I feel like there's another aspect of not being attached to the outcome of how we get there, because sometimes that can mean discomfort too. Like, oh, you want to get to point A to point B, but in order to do that, there's going to be this massive awakening, and that's not always going to feel good. And so we can't just think it's going to be a bed of roses all the time because it won't be.
And not everybody has massive awakenings, they have little ones.
Yeah, that's true. I did not have that. Mine were all massive. Mine were just all tower massive stuff. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had plenty of both, and I just laugh. It's like I think it's that whole idea of, again, I talk a lot about observing rather than getting absorbed, and living with curiosity, because even the big, massive, kick your ass kind of moments, if you can just go, huh, I know I'm going to learn or grow in some ways.
Right.
But
Yeah.
that's very hard to get to that point. It's
It
very
is.
hard to
It
get.
is because
Oof.
like I know I'm going through a lot of things even still currently, and I know also that there's a silver lining in all of it, and it's all going to be a part of my beautiful story. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to throw my entire huge shit fits while I'm going through it. I'm going
Yep.
to.
And that's the human condition.
Yeah, I'm totally going to. I'm going to throw my fits about
Yeah.
it.
I'm a Sag with a Scorpio moon, so I'm going to have a voice and I'm going to speak it very loudly at times.
Yeah.
And so, there's so many different pieces and parts of what goes into a soul that, and everybody's soul path is different. So
Yeah.
it's about again, I use the word alignment, but I use the words alignment for radiant living, and a lot of that has to do with again just getting back to that joy and contentment. And if we know that that's kind of where we're trying to get back to, then we can hopefully kick ourselves back into gear when we need to.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. I would wonder how you might help someone who is trying to get back into joy and contentment and alignment, but maybe doesn't know how to get there. Like, what does that look like to you? Because I know on some part of my journey, there was a point where I had realized a bunch of what you were saying, and I was like, oh, this makes sense. And then there was a piece of me that's like, well, I don't know how to get, I don't know what makes me joyful. Because for so long, we, some of us get into these sorts of where maybe we're trying to be different things that everyone we think everyone else wants to see from us, or wearing different masks or whatever it is, and we kind of lose ourselves in that process. So I know for me, like I had to sit with that and be like, well, what actually makes me joyful? So I'd be curious your thoughts on that.
And again, I talk about the soul story a lot because everybody's going to have a different path to where they end up and where they're going. So, some of us have to kind of swim around in that stuff long enough to figure ourselves out anyway. That's the whole idea of the dark night of the soul anyway, is that, we have to find our way out. We have to find the light. But, I think part of it is, I, I'll try to get more specific with the answer, but, I do talk about body, mind, and soul. As a psychologist, I do look at, are there biological concerns that are keeping you from feeling emotionally well? So, a lot of times and I'm trained to help a person know, or do you have a biochemical kind of imbalance here? Because if you don't deal with the body aspects, you're not going to be able to deal with the mind aspects or the soul aspects. So to me, it's very intertwined. But what I tell people is that the body aspect is the smallest aspect of who we are. And yet, most traditionally trained practitioners are only going to look at the body, meaning, let me write you a script. That's not the answer to everything.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
I think that that's one of those things that's why I do body, mind, soul, is that I help people understand that there are these three different levels. So, once I look at the body and help people understand, okay, is there any biological aspect? Then we go to where the warehoused emotions are, how that person interprets them, and then help them kind of make meaning from them. Because that's the whole point of our soul's evolution, is how do we make meaning of what we're experiencing? Because there are messages in every discomfort that we have. We just have to learn how to interpret it and realize that all of them are pointing to the fact that again we're somehow misaligned from that joy and contentment. So it's kind of a not really a stepwise process, but we really have to look at all of the aspects of who a person is in order to, what I tell people, return to whole person health.
I think that's
And
true. I think that's completely true. But I would ask one more thing. Do you find that when you're dealing with somebody that has CPTSD or PTSD and their mind does not connect the same because of that brain injury, do you find that you have to get a little more creative with that approach?
um, yes, I guess what I would say is, and this could be a whole other topic, is that, I also see trauma as basically more of a soul trauma than an emotional trauma. And so that's the thing is, most PTSD or other traumas are treated through changing the mind, basically, about how we perceive those traumas. But I tell people, if those energetic imprints are left on the soul, it's kind of like the soul is stamped with those
Mhm.
kind of experiences. But if if the practitioner doesn't know that they have to get down to the soul level, then those patients, or I don't like to use
Yeah.
the word patients, I use clients. Those clients are going to continue to experience some sort of reactive response whenever
Right.
something else triggers them. So, I actually, that's again
Because
the
they're
bottom
not
line.
learning how to manage their trigger. They kind of just fall through the cracks, right? Because like if they don't have anyone to help them, yeah. So I get what you're saying.
Well, they may fall through the cracks, but they may also just not feel like they can heal, which
Yeah, that's true
hurts
too.
my heart and soul for them because this is about helping people become empowered and find agency again over their concerns. But that's where again I'm not diminishing traditional care, but it's often just not enough.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Um, there was something else you had posted, I believe it was on Instagram about uh I'm trying to remember, excuse me. It was something about finding peace in your experience or in your journey, regardless of circumstance. Am I getting that right? Um,
Probably, yes.
okay. um, I don't think I'm quoting it exactly, but it was that sentiment. So I'm curious if you could expand a little bit more on that and maybe like how we do that because I think so many people do struggle with that and probably at different points in our lives, all of us struggle with it. But especially now with um, certain certain energies kind of taking place worldwide and all the things, I think that's important. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So I'm going to say a couple things. Now, my only quote that I remember from any of the 5 books that I wrote myself is to know your soul is to know true health. And because you write stuff and then you move on, you write other stuff and you forget exactly what you said. But to know your soul is to know true health. And what I mean by that is soul health and soul healing have all to do with kind of acceptance of where you are at any given time. It's like observing yourself in the situation rather than getting absorbed. And so it's that whole idea, I think of, yeah, we can absolutely have, we can be um, wilty in one aspect of our life and still find joy and contentment because we realize, oh, that's why this is happening. This is why I'm having this kind of experience.
Hmm.
So every, I call them branches of our life. We can have different aspects of our life that are completely like not where we think they should be. It could be a health problem. It could be, marital separation or divorce. It could be our job is not ideal. But, if you can find that peace within in order to get yourself through the discomfort of having one of those areas of life being kind of out of alignment, it helps you move through that misalignment in that branch of your life in order to get to where you're supposed to be. So, it's not like a destination that we get to and we stay at. I mean, that's just not the human condition. It's not even realistic that we're going to be 100% aligned with all aspects of our life. But it's like where we're supposed to be working toward. So, yeah, we can, I know a person who oh gosh, this was about 2 or 3 months ago. She was supposed to join the certification program, and she contacts me and she said, I broke my foot in 3 places. I can't do anything I was hoping to do. I'm like, well, no, that's actually not true. You can. So we had to talk through the fact that even though she was immobilized, literally, that doesn't mean she has to lose her joy and contentment. She just has to redefine or place a meaning on why she was supposed to lay low for however many months that she's going to have to. So it's such a process to help people make meaning of their life but also help them realize that they've got agency above it no matter what.
Yeah, and
And
I think that that's like finding your power in the present moment through gratitude.
that too, absolutely.
Yeah.
Gratitude and appreciation for where you're at any given time.
Yeah. And there's always like, I can say with absolute certainty from somebody that comes from the craziest shit ever and walking through my own journey of PTSD, I can say that even in my hardest struggles, there was usually something
Mhm.
to keep me going. But my brain wasn't trained to see it, not at that time.
Yeah.
And so it is a matter of rewiring how your brain is functioning.
Rewiring and also just getting a different perspective, and
Yeah.
I think, the more you evolve as a soul, the more you realize that this human thing is just incidental. But we have to get to that point where we realize, yeah, we have to go through human stuff in order to evolve and in order to live our soul's path. So I am not at all inviting people to have horrible lives. But
No, it's
when
not
they have
fun.
when they have those glitches in their life, if they can re-perceive them as a step on the path,
Mhm.
it just shifts everything because, we don't get so mired in the moment that we forget that there's something beyond it.
Yeah, and I like your spin on when you talk about the difference between like viewing or witnessing and being absorbed. It's like, am I watching the movie or am I in it? And there is a very um I guess there's a big difference for sure, but also like it you can take yourself out of the mix and just observe
Yes.
as opposed to being fully immersed, like you said. So I like
Yes.
that.
Yeah, it makes all the difference in the world. And I teach probably almost every client how to do that.
Yeah, it's almost like sometimes we take ourselves too fucking seriously.
hmm hmm
Yeah.
Well, because emotions are very seductive. They yank us right into the abyss.
Yeah, they totally do.
And so if you can go, oh, wait, I'm getting triggered. Oh, wait, before I get triggered and absorbed, oh, what am I supposed to be learning from this? If you could just have that bit of a perspective, then you don't get that bungee cord effect. You're actually able to ease into it, go, okay, yeah, this is really uncomfortable, but let me stay open to what I'm supposed to glean from this moment or experience. A huge empowerment.
Yeah, I would say so because then you're coming from a place that's more responsive as opposed to reactive
Absolutely.
and that changes the way your brain shows up for you.
And this is how the human condition, like this is how the skills of the human condition interact so divinely with the soul, is that once you kind of get the hang of your toolbox,
Mhm.
your human toolbox, you can step out of the human condition so much more readily. And so this is very much how it weaves together. It's an art form, really, once you get there.
Oh, it's an absolute art.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I would agree with that.
yeah. It's very fun once you get there.
I love all of that. And there was something else that I was curious about because I've never heard it quite put this way. I think again it was on Instagram, but you were talking about the difference between self-care and soul care, which I think is fascinating because again I don't think I've ever heard that in that way. So I'd be curious if you could speak on that. Like, what is the difference there? What does that look like to you?
Absolutely. I have a webinar I'm going to be releasing pretty soon about this because, people are terrible at self-care anyway. And, we have this idea that we're supposed to exercise a certain number of hours a week and eat a certain number of vegetables or whatever. And so, self-care is necessary as a human, but it doesn't do what it needs to do to restore us as souls. And so I talk about this difference that, yeah, we've got to eat fairly well. We've got to exercise or get fair amount of physical activity. We need to get good sleep. Those are all human kinds of things. But the things that are most important, I think, are soul care, which usually don't cost a lot of money. They don't take a lot of time, but they take intention and awareness. And so, what I mean by that is if we can get to this point where we understand, wow, okay, I really need to recharge. For me, I'll give you an example. I recharge best if I go for a long walk outside amongst trees. And it has to be the intentionality of like absorbing and watching and looking at the trees and just being very mindful of that. That's one way that I feed my soul. Another way I feed my soul is my dogs. I think there's one moving around behind me, and it's
I
this
was
whole,
gonna ask because I could see that little fur ball moving around.
there's two, the other
Oh,
one's on the other
okay.
bed.
Okay.
But there's something just precious about being very present for me with my animals, even if it's 5 minutes. But it's so soul care is about knowing yourself well enough to go, gosh, what is going to restore me in this moment? Going for a long walk is not always going to restore me, but being present with that soulful activity, whatever it is for that particular person, will always restore you. So it's a different kind of restoration that self care does for you versus soul care does for you. Does that make any sense?
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
I'm
I
big,
teach
I'm big
people
on
this lesson.
walks or like grounding outside, but also like one of my go-tos is I love baths. Baths
Yeah,
are like my thing.
yeah, salt baths. I take a
Yeah.
salt bath at every week, and just savoring, the word savoring is such an important word, but to me, if I savor the leaves, if I savor the spring, I can close my eyes and, savor my dog. So I can, it's like, it doesn't cost money. It takes intention.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just a different, very different form of restoration. So it's different for everybody. Some people would savor a basketball game. That wouldn't be me. I would savor something more nature based or something that's going to feed my soul. But that's the other thing is most people don't know what feeds their souls.
Yeah.
And I work heartily to teach people, okay, the difference, because once you understand that, oh, okay, I really need that to restore myself, you got it.
Well, and a lot of times when people are coming out of really conflicting situations or having, like years of struggle, they do forget what brings them joy. And part of that experience is learning. Like, cool, I
Right,
get to try all these new things and figure out which ones work for me.
right, right. Or sometimes they have to remember in general who they are through what they used to do to feed themselves.
Yeah. And it might be that they love that thing they used to do and now they might hate it. You don't know unless you try.
Yeah, yeah.
I would be curious too, because you talked about trees, and I know I saw online too. You said you were like a diehard walker, I think was the phrase.
Mhm. Very
And
much.
it's so funny because I totally resonate with that. If it's snowing, I'm walking. If it's raining, I'm walking, no matter what it is.
Hmm.
Um, so I know you mentioned the trees and nature, and I would be curious your thoughts about this, but I feel like nature plays such a big part in our soul nourishment. I think nature holds a lot of light, and it kind of mirrors that back to us.
Hmm.
And so many of even our guests on here have talked about like nature, and I can totally resonate. So I'd be curious, like your thoughts and what role nature plays in that soul nourishment piece.
Yeah, I love this question actually, Lee. So to me, everything is energy. Everything is energy, just a different form of energy, different frequency of energy. When you think about the energy of nature, and I'm looking right out my window right now because I've got literally like 150-foot trees surrounding my home. And and it's this idea where the energy of nature is much more pure than the energy of humans. And so you think about the energetic exchange that we have with nature, and actually, nature holds space for us. It holds space for our souls. There is research out there that, I don't know if you know the word earthing, but, if we do earthing, we literally go put our hands flat on the earth. We get barefoot and throw our feet on the ground. We lay on the ground, but we can actually have this energetic exchange with the earth, and everybody knows that the earth kind of transmutes negative energy into positive energy. So, any aspect of nature that we can, again, use as part of our soul care is going to be vastly more productive than a lot of the self care activities that are out there. But I know for me, my church every Sunday morning there's a greenway that's not too far from here. And I go pretty much every Sunday. Sometimes I go Saturday and Sunday, and I just walk, walk, walk until I can't walk anymore. And it's just absorbing that energy. I never have a set of earbuds in. I never like, I started to take my phone because I heard of some people that were having emergencies. And I'm thinking, I never thought of needing my phone when I was out walking. But, things like that. It's like learning how to just be present with nature. And again, tons of research out there for how positive it is for our mental health, but really it's amazingly it's astronomically helpful for our soul health as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I think, don't quote me on this, everybody. I'm not 100% sure, but I think there are studies out there that say things like, our natural killer cells, I think they're called, they experience a huge uptick, when we're up in,
Yes.
in nature for a certain amount of time.
Mhm.
Um, and I think there's become like a disconnect too in the way that we live, that we kind of forget that we are from nature. We come from that. I love what you said though about how nature does hold space for us, because I believe that's so true. That there's so much unconditional unconditionality in nature, and there's so much authenticity in nature. Like a tree is never trying to be anything but a tree, you know? Um,
And it's not judging us.
right, exactly. Yeah. Um, do you, I think I asked the last guest this too. I'm always so curious about this question, but do you find yourself having any sort of energetic exchanges with things like trees or anything like that? Because I know I do. So
Daily,
yeah.
daily. Yeah,
Yeah.
daily. And between, and I just did a live Facebook last Sunday, and I was walking down, baseball cap on, I was doing my live, and there's these trees that have grown enough to hang over the walkway. And so, one of the things I always do if I walk under one is I reach up and I let it brush, my hand, just because making that contact for me is like lush. It's just this wonderful, I don't know. There's probably not a human word for it, but there's just this immense interchange just by brushing my hands against leaves. I'm a rock person. I love gardening, so I get my hands in the dirt. I'm a hiker. I love to get out there and hike. So anytime I can actually touch the earth, I'm like so supercharged and filled up that it lasts for a long time for me. Yeah.
I love that because I go on a walk all the time. Sometimes I change up the route, sometimes not so much. But I always walk by this one pine tree that kind of sticks out a little bit into the road. And I got the information one day, and to some people this might sound pretty high on the woo-woo spectrum, and that's totally okay, but
Perfectly good
this
for me.
yeah. But I got the information one day, like I grow out so that, I can make like I'm interested, I'm curious in humans. Like, and again, it wasn't words, it was just more like a feeling of this is how I would articulate this sentiment. And so now every day when I go past, I did it earlier today, I'll brush up my hand against it.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
And I always say hello, in my head and everything. And so I do though think it's such a effective and quick way to kind of bring us back to ourselves and
Mhm.
that soul piece that you talk about, even if it's just like a quick brush or like our feet on the earth or whatever it is, it's so important.
Well, there's all this beautiful research out there right now about how trees communicate with each other through the roots, through the fungi, through basically the microbial kind of interactions under the surface. But what's also interesting is there's also research out there that shows that when trees touch, when they're growing up, they actually make space for the other trees because they want the other tree to have enough sunlight.
Yeah.
So it's like there's this beautiful, like symbiotic kind of dance going on. Another piece of research, I'm kind of a tree nerd in general, but I loved this research, but they're showing that, right now, and I know our world is trying to take away diversity and it drives me batty, but, the research is very clear that forests that have diverse types of trees thrive so much better than like clear cut land that trees are planted on and it's only one species of trees. So it's beautiful because it's all the energetic exchange. So it's that whole idea that we need the differences, and we need the different energies, we need the different frequencies, we need the different sounds, we need the different microbes that come from each different kind of plant. Yeah, I could get very nerdy, but I tell people I live somewhere between science and woo anyway. So
No, I understand. I think when the trees are growing and they make space for each other, I believe that's called crowning, right?
yeah,
Yeah, and I love that. When I read that, I was so fascinated. I'm like, that is just amazing. And I also am familiar with what you're saying about the diversity and that,
yeah,
even I believe, again, don't quote me, but even things like the soil health, is so much better. And even when it comes to like insects that we tend to look at as like pests and things, I try to not use that word so much anymore
oh,
because I think everything in nature has its purpose. But I think we've even seen less, of those levels in forest and things like that have that diversity as opposed to, maybe cultivated in some way or just kind of planted. So
right.
I am also a tree nerd. So
Well, let me give you this, and this is the soulful part of the conversation anyway. But there's a documentary I watched 2 weekends ago that is called Intelligent Trees. and it's a fairly new documentary. But I look at everything through soulful eyes. But really, the language that she was using, one of the researchers was using, was talking about, you know, like the soulfulness of trees and how they work together. So to me, they may be using more scientific terms, but you can kind of read between the lines to see what's happening energetically. So I think it's on Netflix in case you want to go check it out.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, no, I'll have to check that out. Thank you. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Did you want to add anything, April? Did you have any thoughts?
No, I'm actually just totally observing y'all geeking out on tree stuff. I love it because I get to like observe and learn about it more too. And so I'm just kind of, yeah, I'm in awe of the conversation actually.
Yeah, there's an author who he's a German author, but he talks about the hidden life of trees. And again, it's the same thing where you realize that he's talking about the soulfulness of trees, but it's called the hidden life of trees in case you want to nerd out on that too. But yeah, it's I think everything is soulful, and any living being has
For
a
sure.
soul as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would agree with that.
yeah.
I
Well,
would
oh, go ahead. Yep.
I was going to say, I would even go as far as to saying that, and this might be contrary to popular belief, and I don't really care, but I would go as far as to saying that the life of a blade of grass is just as important as the life of one of us. There's no life that's more important or less important than any other.
Yes, when I was showering today, there was a daddy long leg spider right above my shower. And I was talking to him the whole time, saying, "Okay, buddy, as soon as I get out of here, I'm going to get you back out into the forest." And I did. So
Yeah,
it's
Yeah.
one of those things where if we respect the little souls around us, including the grass, then it's going to hold space for us. So,
yeah,
They receive that energy from us too. I think, I talk about like bees. Anyone who knows me knows I love bees. There is something sacred to me about them. And I know so many people who have had this experience of like, oh, they attack me and and I'm like, well, what energy are you approaching it with?
mhm,
Because every time I have approached a bee in any way and kind of just had that intention of like, I honor your space, I honor where you are, I'm not here to harm anything. I've never had any sort of a problem. And I know for some people that can sound really far out there. And there was probably a point in my life where it would have sounded far out there for me. But this is, in my experience, what I've learned to be true. I think we're constantly, whether it's with each other or with trees or with insects or animals, we're constantly in this like energetic exchange and information is being passed.
absolutely. And that's where these, fur balls behind me come in that, it's and I just watched a video this morning on Facebook or Instagram, I'm not sure which, but all the research that's done about, how positive dogs are for our physical, emotional, spiritual health. And it's no brainer for me, but I still like watching those videos. But it is that, these are not just animals or pets, these are little souls that we're inviting into our lives. And when you look at a relationship with a pet like that, it becomes so much more rich. And you know, I yeah. So we're obviously amongst good company when we can talk about this kind of stuff from a soulful perspective.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. And to what April said earlier, like about the blade of grass, I was going to say, April, I completely agree. I look at it as the same life force energy that flows through me, flows through everything else,
Yeah.
and so I'm no lesser or greater than it just is all from the one that, our souls come from in my perspective. So
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I agree with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Miss Katherine Kelly, where can people find your book?
So, two options. You can go to my website at www.drkatherinekelly.com. There's a book tab at the top, and it'll split into either the Soul Health series, which there are 3 books under that one, or the Soul of Psychology series, which right now there's 2. There's soon to be others. And there's also webinars. And like I said, there's a webinar that I'll be releasing within the next 3 to 4 weeks that I call the Recipe for Radiance. And it's Mastering the Art and Soul of Self-Care. So basically understanding this soul care piece it is, something that I'm teaching people. But there's lots of other offerings on there as well. So, I think I had mentioned that I'm doing this certification for healthcare practitioners and coaches and educators to learn how to integrate the soul into what they do. So I'm already kind of in the first level of that with folks, but I've got a lot out there and I love helping souls evolve. So whatever I can do to help people do that, I'm happy to do.
I love that. The heart of service.
Yeah.
Um, so if I could ask you to leave our listeners with any words of wisdom, what would that be?
Really to get to know their souls more. It's the number one thing that I think has been, well, not I think, I know has been left out of healthcare and mental health care.
Hmm.
The medical field started with the soul, but it's nowhere to be found. The mental health care world started with the soul. It's, yeah, minimally to be found. But it's just this whole idea of soul is not some religious term. It's basically the very essence of who we are. And that is really the mission of why we're here, is to get to know ourselves.
Yeah,
So get to know ourselves and honor it. And so, in really embracing that concept is going to enrich your life, but also help you guide your life so much more.
yeah, yeah, I think that's true. And thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. So thank you so much for being with us today. I think you are a breath of fresh air. So, so, um, so I appreciate your time with us. And Lee, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, just thank you for coming on and being with us and sharing. And yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
Thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity. And anytime I can have a wonderful conversation like this, I am all in. So
Yeah,
thank you very much.
absolutely. So I'm going to stop the recording here, you guys. I'm going to just say goodbye to our listeners and we will see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.